Union Jack, the black, gold and red flag of the new young state. Uganda is born again, free and independent.
On the 9th of October 1962, Uganda became a constitutional monarchy, with Queen Elizabeth II as the Queen of Uganda and the Governor-General who performed duties on her behalf. The Supreme Central Legislature became the Parliament of Uganda, consisting of the monarchy and the National Assembly. In 1963, Uganda adopted a new constitution abolishing the British monarchy, making it a federal state within the Commonwealth. Following the proclamation of the State of Uganda on the 9th of October 1963, the King of Buganda, Edward Mutesa II, became the first president of Uganda and Milton Obote as his prime minister. This video will look at all Ugandan presidents from 1962 to date. President Mutesa was the 31st King of Buganda Kingdom before becoming president. In 1942, at the age of 18, he succeeded his father, Daudi Chwa II, who had died 3 years earlier. His activism and the fight for autonomy in his Kingdom of Buganda began in 1953 when Oliver Lytton, the Secretary of State for the Colonies, proposed the idea of an East African Federation, a move Mutesa and his Bugandan government vehemently opposed. As a result, Andrew Cohen, the governor, arrested Mutesa and exiled him to Britain, triggering countrywide protests demanding his return. Upon his return, he signed the Buganda Agreement on October 18, 1955, which set out the roadmap for Uganda's independence. In May 1961, a small group of Baganda formed the Kabaka Yeka Party, also known as KY or King Only, to unite the Baganda behind the throne and guarantee Buganda's separate identity. The kingdom would later identify with the movement and form a coalition with Obote's UPC party to defeat the Democratic Party, which was viewed as Catholic and anti-Buganda, making Obote the first prime minister. The coalition also delivered Mutesa as a president in a parliament session on the 4th of October 1963 via a secret ballot with support of over two-thirds majority of the members. However, the alliance between UPC and KY was like a marriage where two parties came together out of convenience but ultimately found it difficult to stand the test of time. In August 1964, Obote and his party called for a referendum on the fate of the two lost counties of Buyaga and Bugangaizi. The referendum was to determine whether the counties should continue to be part of the Kingdom of Buganda, be transferred back to Bunyoro, or to be established as a separate district. The electorate, consisting of the residents of the two counties at independence, voted overwhelmingly to return to Bunyoro. The result of the vote bolstered Obote's support in Bunyoro and created outrage in Buganda, leading to riots and attacks on kingdom ministers. On the 9th of November, Mike Kintu, the Prime Minister of Buganda, even resigned. When Obote presented the necessary documentation officiating the transfer of jurisdiction for Mutesa to sign as president, the latter refused, declaring, "I can never give away Buganda land." Obote signed in his place, but the ordeal strained their relationship. Obote further provoked Mutesa by establishing UPC offices in Buganda, against the inter-party agreement. He also encouraged KY assembly members to defect to his party through patronage offers. In 1964, cracks appeared in the UPC leadership when a conservative, Grace Ibingira, began attempting to take control of the party. For Ibingira to succeed and unseat Obote, Mutesa instructed Baganda MPs to join the UPC. On the 16th of March 1965, KY Member of Parliament Daudi Ocheng lodged an accusation in Parliament that Idi Amin, Obote, Felix Onama and Adoko Nichon had illegally profited off gold, ivory and cash originating from the Congo in return for support of the rebels in the country. This came to be known as the gold scandal. By September, in a closed session of Parliament, Ocheng introduced a motion that urged the government to act on the accusations. In 1966, with the scandal closing in and Obote forcing a removal from office by factional infighting within his own party, he had 4 leading members of his party arrested and detained. He suspended the federal constitution and declared himself president in February 1966, effectively deposing Mutesa. In return, the Buganda Regional Parliament passed a resolution on the 20th of May 1966, declaring that Buganda's incorporation into Uganda had ended with the suspension of the constitution. It also requested the federal government to vacate the capital city, which was in Buganda. Obote responded with an armed attack upon the Kabaka's palace, sending Mutesa into exile in the United Kingdom. Obote went before the parliament and declared, "There is nothing to regret. The oneness of Uganda must be assured." While in exile, Mutesa wrote an autobiography titled The Desecration of My Kingdom. In his words, he said, "I had feared that something like an attack would happen, but I was not ready for the magnitude of destruction they meted out." Mutesa died of alcohol poisoning in his London flat in 1969. Identified by the Metropolitan Police as suicide, the death has been viewed as an assassination by those who claim Mutesa may have been force-fed vodka by Obote regime agents. The attack on Mutesa's palace was followed by Obote's abolition of Uganda's kingdoms, including Buganda. Obote also declared Uganda as a republic, leading to heightened political unrest and ethnic tensions within the country. The assault on Mutesa's palace and its aftermath played a significant role in shaping Uganda's political landscape. It had long-lasting implications for the relationship between the central government and traditional institutions in Uganda. Historian Frank Schubert posited that Obote's takeover marked a key point in Ugandan history. He said, "It had become very clear that the military had become a central institution for solving internal political problems, and that political leaders like Obote would not shy away from using the military force at whatever cost." After exiling the Kabaka, Obote installed himself as president, becoming the second president of Uganda. To maintain control, Parliament adopted the 1967 Constitution, also known as the Pigeonhole Constitution, abolishing the Kingdom of Buganda, other kingdoms, and declaring Uganda a republic. Throughout the late 1960s, the Obote government became increasingly crippled and paranoid about Buganda activists. His response was to make illegal many fields of culture and political life. The name Buganda itself was obliterated, dividing the kingdom into 4 districts. Obote relied on his intelligence wing, the General Service Unit, headed by his cousin Akena Adoko, to crack down on any dissenters. He arrested a large number of Baganda and non-Baganda politicians who were friendly to Buganda. As his unpopularity grew, he increasingly turned on his northern Nilotic tribe supporters, rather than strengthening the party in the South Bantu tribes. He was also equally at the mercy of the army. And for the job well done, Brigadier Idi Amin Dada was promoted again and embarked on a recruitment drive. He recruited largely from his region and tribe, the Kakwa, Lugbar, and men from the lands bordering southern Sudan. On the 19th of December 1969, Obote was the target of an assassination attempt on his way out of the UPC Annual Delegates Conference. Assailants shot Obote in the face, breaking 2 of his teeth and a bullet passing through his cheek. A grenade was thrown at him but did not explode. The assassination attempt was a signal of his government's serious opposition. In reaction to the attempt, he passed emergency laws where anyone brandishing a gun in his presence received an automatic death sentence, and throwing an egg would get you life imprisonment. Upon investigation, the police concluded that the attack was the work of Benedicto Kiwanuka, the Democratic Party leader, who was arrested and jailed. All opposition parties were banned, leaving Obote as an effective supreme leader. He declared a state of emergency for much of the time, and many political opponents were jailed without trial for life. In 1969 to 1970, Obote published pamphlets highlighting his political and economic policies. The Common Man's Charter was a summary of his approach to socialism, known as the move to the left. The government took over 60% of major private corporations and banks in 1970. During Obote's regime, flagrant and widespread corruption emerged in the name of his version of socialism. His government pursued an Africanization policy that targeted Ugandan Indians, announcing that he would expel over 40,000 Indians from Uganda, something he didn't stay long enough to implement. However, in 1969, approximately 30,000 Kenyans were expelled from Uganda by Obote's government. This action was part of a broader move to expel foreign nationals. It targeted Kenyans for taking jobs and economic opportunities from native Ugandans. Obote had become unpopular. His fallout with the Baganda and the socialist policies made him a target by the West at the time of the Cold War. Above all, the biggest mistake was to mess with the military that had helped him capture power from Mutesa. In 1970, he criticized Amin openly and initiated an investigation into his activities. The relationship between Obote and Amin became increasingly strained, culminating in Obote's decision to arrest Amin. This move alarmed Amin and his military supporters. Idi Amin, feeling directly threatened by Obote's maneuvers, capitalized on this discontent. And so, on January the 25th, 1971, while Obote was attending a Commonwealth conference in Singapore, Amin struck and launched a coup, successfully overthrowing Obote's government and seizing power. The coup was largely bloodless, highlighting the extent to which Obote had lost military support. Amin's takeover was made possible by Obote's alienation of key military figures and his failure to maintain a cohesive and loyal military establishment. When Idi Amin took power in January 1971, he released a list of 18 points justifying the coup against Obote. His coup was highly welcomed, especially among the Baganda, making him the third president of Uganda. One of his first actions was to release political prisoners, including individuals detained without trial during Obote's regime. This move earned him significant domestic political capital initially.
The members of the Uganda Army and Air Force decided to take over from the civilian rule because of the last arrangement which were made by the Dr. Apollo Milton Obote to disarm the whole tribe of Uganda except his own tribe, Langi and Acholi. And also, that is the point which brought all this problem.
His cabinet was praised for including some of the best political minds and respected leaders in the country. It consisted predominantly of civilians, with only Amin and one other member from the military. To please the Baganda and reconcile, he returned the body of the king on the 31st of March 1971, accorded it a full state burial with all honors. In 1972, he implemented Obote's policy of Africanization by expelling approximately 60,000 Asians, mostly of Asian descent, from Uganda. He urged that the Asian community exploited Uganda's economy and that their departure will benefit Ugandans by providing them more economic opportunities. All expelled Asians were compensated with money channeled through the Indian government.
These Asians were brought by British here to Uganda. Therefore, the British and those, they are responsible to look after those Asians, because I have got also difficulty in Uganda of economy.
The policy was popular with Ugandan people as well as the entire continent. However, it hit the Ugandan economy as goods shortages skyrocketed. Contrary to popular belief, Amin had countless achievements for Uganda in education, health, the economy, sports, the army, and culture. He was also a strong Pan-Africanist, an anti-imperialist, hosting the Organization of African Unity Summit in 1975, reinforcing his image as a significant player in African politics at that time. Amin's hosting of the OAU Summit in 1975 solidified his role as a key figure in African politics. It showcased him as a commitment Pan-Africanist and his desire to unite African nations against imperialism. This move also enhanced his reputation among African leaders, positioning Uganda as an influential player on the continent. Furthermore, his diplomatic efforts were instrumental in establishing Uganda's membership in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which has significantly helped the country's development. His support for Palestine was welcomed by many in the African and the Arab worlds, as they felt he was standing up for a just cause. This support helped to strengthen Uganda's relationship with these countries and resulted in increased trade and investment. After Amin took power in a bloodless coup, a lot of opposition developed internally and externally. The former supporters of Milton Obote, including soldiers and government officials, launched an attack on Amin's rule in Tanzania, given Obote was friends with Nyerere and used Tanzania as his base. For example, in 1976, Ugandan exiles in Tanzania organized the Ugandan National Liberation Front, UNLF, an armed group seeking to overthrow Amin. Several attempts to overthrow him were made by these groups, although they were largely unsuccessful. Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere was a staunch opponent of Amin. After Amin's forces invaded Tanzania in 1978, Nyerere's government launched a counter-offensive. The Tanzanian People's Defense Forces, along with Ugandan exiles, formed the UNLA, the Ugandan National Liberation Army, and invaded Uganda in 1979. The UNLF was a coalition of various Ugandan opposition groups formed in exile. It consisted members of different political factions, ethnic groups, and former soldiers. The UNLF, backed by Tanzanian forces, played a central role in the military campaign against Amin. The combination of international resistance, external military intervention, and international pressure led to Amin's downfall. On the 11th of April 1979, Tanzanian forces and the UNLF captured Kampala, forcing Amin to flee. He first fled to Libya and later found refuge in Saudi Arabia, where he lived in exile until his death in 2003. At the peak of his power, Amin was viewed as the most famous and infamous person ever to come out of the African continent. No leader has had books written about him as Amin. He cultivated a legion of fans, as some Ugandans still hail him as a hero and as the nation's godfather. His legacy is contested and will continue to divide opinion. There is no doubt about some of the atrocities committed under his regime. However, little examination has been made to separate the good from the bad due to too much propaganda out there. Like many controversial leaders, Amin's legacy is a complex mix of admiration and condemnation. Similar to figures such as Fidel Castro, Muammar Gaddafi, Robert Mugabe, Amin is simultaneously remembered for his defiant anti-colonial stance and criticized for his brutal repression and human rights abuses. The polarizing nature of his rule ensures that his impact on Uganda remains a subject of heated debate. On the 13th of April 1979, Professor Yusuf Lule was sworn in as the fourth president of Uganda under the Uganda National Liberation Front. The UNLF was formed during a conference of Ugandan exiles in March 1979 in the northern Tanzanian town of Moshi. The Moshi Conference included 28 groups, including the Democratic Party, Save Uganda Movement, Yoweri Museveni's Front for National Salvation, and Obote's Uganda People's Congress, among others. The UNLF was to be governed by a 30-member National Consultative Committee, or the NCC, and an 11-member National Executive Committee. This included 3 special commissions: Finance and Administration, Political and Developmental Affairs, and Military Affairs. Lule took office at a time when Uganda's national institutions were dysfunctional. The country was plagued by lawlessness and violence. He presided over a failed state. While some of the members favored a government led by another militarist with civilians in supportive roles, the others sought a civilian-led government prioritizing civilian authority over the military. On the 20th of June 1979, the NCC convened and voted to remove President Lule from office. This was due to his appointment of a 52-member cabinet without NCC input, which was seen as a violation of the Moshi spirit. The Moshi Conference had agreed that the post-Amin president would adhere to its spirit and be accountable to the NCC, which acted as an interim parliament of sorts. However, in Kampala, Lule ignored these arrangements. Not only was the cabinet unapproved by the NCC, but it also outnumbered them, raising serious concerns among council members who felt sidelined. He also sought to replace Tanzanian forces with British soldiers, a move deemed unacceptable. In his defense, the president stated that he did not need to consult the NCC and would do so only at his discretion. In addition, Lule inflamed tensions by awarding his cabinet $5,000 in rehabilitation allowances, despite a limited treasury of funds. When councillors expressed outrage, he offered them the same allowance, which they rejected. To cripple the UNLA, the president withheld funding and planned to disband it and replace it with a new national army, angering former leaders like Museveni and Obote. Patience ran out when he dismissed Muwanga from office, a staunch UPC and Obote supporter. Muganda himself, the Baganda, welcomed Lule's presidency, hoping he would protect Buganda's interests, so he implemented measures that pleased them, restoring administrative unity and granting more powers to Uganda's government. However, Lule's actions led to distrust among other ethnic groups who feared he favored Baganda at their expense, labeling him a monarchist and a feudalist. At exactly 1 p.m. on the 20th of June, the NCC voted via a secret ballot. Of the results, 18 councillors voted in favor of his removal and 14 against. Having lost the vote, he was dismissed and his cabinet. Lule's presidency lasted just 68 days in power, the shortest in Uganda's history. Many Baganda believed that he was ousted for protecting their legitimate interests, leading to large protests in Kampala. His removal sparked clashes between demonstrators and Tanzanian troops. The protesters blocked streets, destroyed vehicles, and merchants inflated prices of basic goods. Armed groups emerged, rendering Buganda virtually ungovernable. On the 21st of October 1980, the Ugandan Court of Appeal ruled that Lule's removal was unlawful, stating he had the authority to appoint ministers without the approval of the NCC. However, most Ugandans ignored this ruling due to the rapidly evolving political climate. After his ouster, Lule was flown to Tanzania, where he was detained before being allowed to travel to London. Fearing Obote's grip on power, Lule and others founded the Uganda Freedom Fighters. On the 8th of June 1981, the UFF merged with Museveni's Popular Resistance Army to form the National Resistance Movement, with Lule as chairman and Museveni as vice chairman. Lule became a leading critic of Obote and authored a book, Human Rights Violation in Uganda under Obote, which was widely circulated amongst NGOs. Over the last 6 years of his life, Lule received treatment for a kidney disorder in London. He died on the 21st of January 1985 from kidney failure following surgery and was buried in London. When Lule was kicked out, this left a vacuum that was filled on the 20th of June 1979 when Godfrey Lukongwa Binaisa was appointed as the 5th president of Uganda by the National Consultative Commission, which was the then supreme governing body of the Uganda National Liberation Front. He was initially seen as a unifying figure representing a coalition of various political groups within the UNLF. However, Binaisa faced immense challenges: a fragmented nation, economic instability, and a military divided in loyalties undermining his authority and complicating his governance. The task of restoring order and legitimacy was daunting. He aimed to establish a civilian-led government, but struggled against pressures from military factions that desired stronger influence over politics. His decisions often faced pushback from both supporters and detractors. Despite his efforts, dissatisfaction grew. By 1980, the political climate had become increasingly hostile. Binaisa was ultimately ousted in a coup orchestrated by his former allies, leading to further instability in Uganda. The president's biggest mistake was to mess with the army again through his reshuffles, which led to his demise. It was like trying to put out a fire by fanning its flames. The more he tried to control the political situation, the more it spiraled out of control. First, through a radio broadcast, he dismissed Idi Ojok, who was one of Obote's biggest allies, a top commander of the Kikosi Maalum, one of the Ugandan fighting forces that fought alongside the TPDF to oust Idi Amin. The decision came against allegations that Idi Ojok had turned the UNLA into his private army. He had bases in most parts of northern Uganda, especially in Lango sub-region, where he and Obote came from, and in Acholi, where other top UNLA commanders such as Tito Okello Lutwa and Tito Okello originated. Binaisa was desperately keen to trim his powers. Unfortunately, he did not have enough power and military force to back up his actions. The same broadcast announced a mini cabinet reshuffle that saw Fronasa leader Museveni moved from the Ministry of Defense, renaming himself as his replacement. Binaisa had bitten off more than he could chew. Oite Ojok and other pro-Obote elements quickly moved to counter his actions. It was like a game of chess, with Binaisa making a bold move that quickly backfired and his opponents responding in kind. On the 10th of May, angry soldiers stormed the Nile Mansions Hotel, where many cabinet ministers lived and worked. On the 11th of May, UNLS soldiers, loyal to Oite Ojok, surrounded and took over Radio Uganda's premises. They defiantly announced that Brigadier Oite Ojok was still the chief of staff of the army. They also announced that the NCC would urgently be convened to discuss the developments to avoid a crisis or a possible civil war. On May the 12th, Godfrey Binaisa was finally announced as no longer president. A presidential commission that was comprised of, among others, Paulo Muwanga, Yoweri Museveni, Oite Ojok, and Tito Okello took over matters of the state. Binaisa, a former Attorney General who helped Obote write the Pigeonhole Constitution and Republican Constitutions, was briefly placed under the house arrest before fleeing into exile in Kenya first and later Britain and the United States. Throughout the early 1980s and 1990s, Binaisa lived in New York practicing law, returning to Uganda in 2001. On the 5th of August 2010, Binaisa passed away from a stroke in his sleep, aged 90. His presidency, though brief, highlighted the challenges of governance in post-Amin Uganda and underscored the difficulties in uniting a fractured nation. His legacy is a reminder of the complex interplay between military power and democratic aspirations. In the complex political landscape of Uganda, Paulo Muwanga stands out as a key figure during the turbulent transition period. His leadership and decisions left a significant mark on Uganda's history. On the 12th of May 1980, Muwanga played a pivotal role when the army overthrew Godfrey Binaisa. He became the head of a 6-man military commission, acting as the de facto president of Uganda for a short period. He later chaired the Presidential Commission of Uganda from May the 22nd to December the 15th, 1980, assuming powers of the presidency during the transitional phase. One of the most contentious aspects of Muwanga's leadership was the 1980 general elections that his administration was accused of blatantly rigging in favor of the UPC, leading to Milton Obote's return to power. This election remains one of the most disputed in Uganda's history at the time. The contested results sparked significant dissatisfaction, prompting Yoweri Museveni to launch a guerrilla war campaign which led to unprecedented levels of violence and deaths that have never been seen before in Uganda. Between 1980 and 1985, Muwanga served as the Vice President and Minister of Defense under President Milton Obote. He also briefly held the position of Prime Minister of Uganda from August 1st to August 25th, 1985 under President Tito Okello. In October 1986, he faced arrest and subsequent detention. Although he was acquitted in 1988, he was detained once again from 1989 to 1990. Paulo Muwanga died on the 1st of April 1991 at the age of 66. The lingering effects of Muwanga's decisions are still felt in Uganda's political landscape today. The disputed 1980 elections and subsequent guerrilla warfare contributed to a prolonged period of instability and mistrust in the electoral process. This era set a precedent for political unrest, influencing the country's approach to governance and elections for decades to come. Having previously led Uganda from 1966 to 1971, Obote made a dramatic return to power following a controversial and widely disputed election in 1980. His return was seen by some as a restoration of order, while others viewed it as a continuation of autocratic rule. His return was similar to a person attempting to return to a scene of crime expecting different results. Although there may have been good intentions, the mistakes were repeated, leading to the same ill-fated outcome. The UPC opposition believed the elections were rigged, leading to a guerrilla war spearheaded by Yoweri Museveni's National Resistance Army and other military groups. In 1983, the Obote government launched Operation Bonanza.
Well, I leave it to my own countrymen and women. If they want a difficult time, they will support these lawless elements. If they want stability, if they want rehabilitation, if they want peace, if they want prosperity, I call upon them not to support such persons, but to report them immediately so that the security forces can deal with them and deal with them quickly.
A brutal campaign to crush the insurgency led by Museveni and the NRA. Facing a relentless and growing rebellion, Obote's government took drastic measures to maintain control. This operation involved large-scale massacres, extrajudicial killings, forced displacement, and destruction of property. Estimates suggest that between 100,000 and 500,000 people died as a result of the conflict between Obote's Uganda National Liberation Army and the guerrillas.
Than they were under Amin. Because under Amin, first of all, Idi Amin was not killing people outside the intellectual class. He used to kill only the elite, elements from the elite who were threatening his position. Or sometimes over rivalry, over business, things like that. But he never touched the peasantry. But Obote is killing everybody.
Despite its brutality, Operation Bonanza failed to quell the rebellion. Instead, it fueled further resistance against Obote's government and strengthened the resolve of the NRA. The operation's failure contributed to Obote's overthrow in 1985 by a military coup led by General Tito Okello Lutwa. After his second removal from power, Obote fled to Kenya and later to Zambia. In August 2005, he announced his intention to step down as UPC leader. In October that year, he died of a kidney failure in Johannesburg Hospital at the age of 79. He was given a state funeral in Uganda in October 2005, something that angered the Baganda. Obote's legacy in modern Ugandan politics is complex and multifaceted. While some view him as a leader who struggled to maintain national unity and faced significant challenges, others remember him for the violent and repressive measures his government employed. His tenure remains a point of contention, influencing contemporary decisions on governance, human rights, and the role of the military intervention in political transitions. General Tito Okello Lutwa swept into power on the crest of a military mutiny after tension between Acholi and Langi soldiers had reached a breaking point. The appointment of Brigadier Smith Opon Achak, a Langi, as chief of staff did not sit well with the Acholi soldiers, who had expected Brigadier Olala Okello, a more experienced officer, to be appointed. By 1984, the war against the NRA intensified, taking advantage of the divisions within the army while anarchy reigned. It was only a matter of time before a mutiny took place. On the 27th of July 1985, trucks loaded with military ammunition and soldiers moved to Gulu, in the northern parts of Uganda. The BBC announced the fall of Obote's regime in a bloodless coup, followed by Obote's second exile. Truckloads of UNLA soldiers wielding guns drove through Kampala's streets as Obote fled into exile via Kenya, heading to Zambia, where he later died in October 2005. A significant effort was made to resolve Uganda's civil war during the Nairobi peace talks of 1985, with various factions vying for control aimed to establish a ceasefire, power sharing, and constitutional reforms, signing the Nairobi Peace Agreement on the 17th of December 1985. Furthermore, Tito tried to forge a coalition government with various political parties and warring factions, bringing Obote's henchmen like Paulo Muwanga as the executive prime minister. Aware of the tense political mood in Buganda, Okello and his junta sought support there, but the reception was cold. Unlike before, there were no celebrations in Buganda to mark Obote's fall. Tito Okello announced that Uganda would be governed by a military council for 12 months before general elections. By January 1986, it had become evident that the peace agreement would not hold. The NRA, dissatisfied with the progress of the peace process, resumed its offensive. On the 26th of January 1986, the NRA captured Kampala, effectively ending Tito Okello's presidency and marking the beginning of Yoweri Museveni's rule. Upon his overthrow, Tito Okello fled into exile, where he died on the 3rd of June 1996 at the age of 82. His remains were repatriated and buried in Kitgum district. At his funeral, Museveni described him as a great man dedicated to the service of his country, remembered for his efforts in bringing about peace to Uganda. The Nairobi peace talks and Tito Okello's brief presidency were critical moments in Uganda's turbulent history. Though short-lived, these events set the stage for the rise of Yoweri Museveni and significant political changes in Uganda. When Yoweri Kaguta Museveni took power in 1986, it marked a significant shift in the country's political landscape. Seen by many as a fresh start after years of turmoil, Museveni's early years were characterized by efforts to consolidate his rule, stabilize the country, and initiate economic and political reforms. From 1986 to 1995, Museveni focused on stabilizing and rebuilding Uganda. He implemented significant economic and political reforms and adopted a new constitution designed to establish democratic governance. One of his notable actions were restoring the kingdoms in Uganda, including the Buganda kingdom under the Kabaka Mutebi. He also professionalized the army under his control, in his image, carried out disarmament programs, reconciled with rebels, and maintained discipline in his early years. During the drafting of the 1995 constitution, Museveni assured Ugandans that he would not stay in power indefinitely. The constitution also included an age limit for the presidential candidates, barring those above 75 and below 35 from running for office. Despite facing criticism for dictatorial practices, Museveni's tenure has been marked by infrastructure development, improved healthcare and education systems, as well as international relations and focus on economic growth. Through his dictatorial tendencies, Museveni stifled political opposition, manipulating the electoral processes and amending the constitution to extend his presidency. Human rights organizations reported abuses by security forces and suppression of free speech. His administration has also been accused of perennial corruption and rampant nepotism, hindering transparency and good governance. Museveni's son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, has rapidly risen through the ranks of the Ugandan military, currently holding the position of general. Now the command of the Uganda People's Defense Forces, the National Army, he is known for his influential role in the army and is a prominent political figure. Speculation about Museveni grooming him as his successor has intensified, fueled by Muhoozi's public statements and active social media presence. This apparent succession plan has sparked controversy, with many Ugandans expressing concern over a political dynasty and the erosion of democratic principles. As Uganda approaches the 40th year of Museveni's rule, the country's future is at crossroads. Key questions revolve around democratic transition and the potential succession of Muhoozi. Many Ugandans advocate for political reforms, greater transparency, and a return to democratic processes. Economic challenges and social issues such as youth unemployment and healthcare also demand urgent attention. The international community is closely watching Uganda, pressing for adherence to democratic principles and human rights. Ultimately, Uganda's future hinges on navigating these complexities and achieving a peaceful and inclusive political transition.